What's going on YouTube? It's Teach back again with another video, and today I'm giving you my offseason grades for the 4 AFC North teams. That's right, we're talking about the Baltimore Ravens and Cincinnati Bengals, the Cleveland Browns, and the Pittsburgh Steelers. So before we get started, hit that like button if you guys are excited and enjoyed today's video. Subscribe if you like what you see and want to see more football content like this in your life. And of course, let me hear your offseason grades down below in the comment section. What would you grade the Ravens? Free agency, their draft, their overall offseason. Same thing for the Bengals, the Browns, and the Steelers. And of course, the last question mark in this is who's going to be the biggest question left on the roster? What position group, and then who do you think could be the player that steps up and makes that question mark, kind of go away? So let me hear your thoughts down below in the comments section. Let's waste no time and jump right into it, starting with the Baltimore Ravens, coming off a 10-7 season. And all in all, I tend to really like the Ravens offseason pretty much year in and year out. Free agency grade, I'll give it an A-, and a big part of that is re-signing Lamar Jackson, which we'll talk about in a minute. Bringing in Odell Beckham Jr., another weapon for him to be used, or for him to use. And then everything else was kind of modest, not a whole lot of other big spending, additions. But nonetheless, a couple of 1- and 2-year deals to kind of fill out the rest of the roster. That's something I love about the Ravens offseason every year. They take free agency to kind of patch up any hole they have. So that way they go to the NFL draft knowing we don't have to reach for anything. We can truly go best player available, because if we have to, we have enough edge rushers to get by, enough offensive line depth to get by, things of that nature. And actually talk about the draft, I'd give it a B+. You could easily convince me it should be A-. No second rounders, part of the reason this grade gets pulled down a little bit. But Zay Flowers, love that pick. And, it's just insurance because OBJ's coming off an injury. Rashad Bateman's coming off an injury. So if, those two stay healthy, Zay Flowers is an awesome 3 that you can do a lot of different things with. Gadget player, could also beat you over the top. Or if Bateman misses time or OBJ gets hurt, you have a first-round wide receiver you can lean on to be a big part of your offense. And for this team that does, I still assume even with Todd Monken coming over, it's going to still have its identity through its run game and using Lamar Jackson's legs. I think Zay Flowers is an interesting component to take advantage of there as a yards after the catch guy, a gadget dude, and maybe even run some triple option. Him, J.K. Dobbins, Lamar Jackson on the backfield. I feel like that would give defenses a lot of headaches. And then the other big pick that I loved, Kai Blue Kelly was solid in the 5th round, didn't hate that whatsoever. Trenton Simpson, I thought that was a great value in the 3rd round. Allows them to move on from Patrick Queen pretty easily. And I think Simpson could be an upgrade over Queen, pair him up with Roquan Smith, which is where their 2nd rounder went. Then all of a sudden, that linebacking room goes from a weak spot 2 years ago to all of a sudden going into 2023-24. It's one of the best parts of that roster. But the other pick I'm talking about is Andrew Voorhees. I can't sing the praises enough about how great of a value that is. One, I think he's a perfect fit for that blocking scheme. And secondly, I know he tore his ACL at the Combine, but we live in an age where these guys are coming back from that injury sooner than what was the case, 5 to 10 years ago. And a lot of times these guys come back playing as the same player, maybe even a little bit better, or at least not nearly taking as big of a drop-off as we would have seen maybe 5 to 10 years ago. Like that surgery and that process and, sports science in general has just gotten to a point where it's a setback, but it's not detrimental. It's not going to change who you are as a player for the most part. So I think Andrew Voorhees, this is the last year of Kevin Zeitler, so I think he's going to become a guy that, ton of college experience, going to become a plug-and-play starter pretty soon. And by the 2nd year of his contract, I wouldn't be surprised if he is a starter, and it's him plus Ben Cleveland replacing Kevin Zeitler. So I just love the value. Drafting a future starter in the 7th round, it's not often you get the chance to do that. So overall offseason grade, I'll go B+. Again, you can convince me this should be A-. Biggest move was keeping Lamar Jackson. I am a big Lamar Jackson fan, which kind of kills me because we'll talk about my favorite team in this division. But Lamar Jackson, and now he's got the most weapons around him he's ever had, including OBJ, including Zay Flowers. You still, of course, got Rashad Bateman coming off injury, J.K. Dobbins, Mark Andrews, who's a freak. So it finally feels like he has the supporting cast around him to really take another step forward as a passer, while also having the upside of already being someone who's won an MVP, and unanimous decision at that. He's already hit that apex now. If hopefully he stays healthy and get back to that, and then maybe do a little bit more through the air with those extra weapons. And also small moves on the defense, right? Like drafting a Kai Blue Kelly, 1-year contract for a couple of corners that they signed as well. taking advantage of Trenton Simpson falling to the third round. Like, just a bunch of smart moves across the board, which, again, I feel like I say this every offseason with Ravens. It's just one smart move after another. It may not be the big splash signing that changes the complexion of the team and it puts them over the top. No, it's just one small move after another small move that just makes sense, and ultimately it all kind of adds up. Biggest question mark left, I would say, is still corner, right? Marlon Humphrey, great player, but then it's like, is it Kai Blue Kelly? I actually think Jalen Arbor Davis could be the guy that steps up. Only played 3 games last year and was bad in those 3 games. But I really like the value of him as a 4th-round pick in the 2022 NFL draft. And now with a year of experience, an offseason, one more offseason under his belt, going to work with Humphrey and a great coaching staff that, Baltimore just feels like one of these player development factories. So I feel pretty confident about Armour Davis going into year 2, and I wouldn't be surprised whatsoever if he becomes a competent starter in year 2. So I think he's going to step up and give him at least a solid baseline on the other side of Marlon Humphrey. All right, let's move on to talk about the Cincinnati Bengals here. Obviously, won the AFC North, and we'll do some way too early regular season predictions, but they may well be my Super Bowl pick. We'll see. Free agency grade B+. It's another team that has a lot of money spread out, so there's a couple of big moves, but for the most part, it's just kind of patching up the roster. A Nick Scott type of signing, 3 years, $12 million. It's like, what's a way we can soften the blow of losing Von Bell and Jesse Bates? Well, it's just get this guy who can do a lot of different things with, and he's not too expensive. Love the Jermaine Pratt re-signing. For less than $7 million a year. I think he's better than TJ Edwards, and they're about playing for the same amount of money. So I think that was an absolute steal. So if you wanted to go value side, who's the best signing? I'd probably go Jermaine Pratt. But when it comes to the biggest impact, I think I got to go Orlando Brown Jr. here. They've been looking to find that that number one bookend solidifying position type of player at left tackle, and really at either tackle spot, because unfortunately they kind of thought Lyle Collins would be that last offseason, but obviously injuries caught up and bad play caught up to him. So hopefully they'll be able to entice Jonah Williams to flip up to right tackle, and he'll be a solid player replacement for Lyle Collins, or at least competition. Maybe he plays left guard. I always kind of liked him as a guard, so I'd prefer him over Cordell Volson or Jackson Carman at left guard, and then maybe we'll see what Jackson Carman can do Lyle Collins, maybe with Jackson Carman as his competition at right tackle. We'll see, but I assume they'll figure that part out. The biggest addition, again, is Orlando Brown Jr., because no matter how else the rest of the offensive line shifts, they added the best player to that unit with Orlando Brown Jr. And I'm not really a guy who says Orlando Brown Jr. is a top 5 tackle in the league. He's he's a stud or anything. He's an above average tackle, and he's a solid one. Don't get me wrong. But 4 years, $64 million, I think that's the right price point to get Orlando Brown Jr. And I also think he's going to be really good in the run game and make Joe Mixon happy and whoever else might step up in that running back committee. But he is certainly the best pass protecting tackle that Joe Burrow's had during his career. I think it's still safe to say that, despite him maybe being a better run blocker. But then to take us to the NFL draft, I just love how Cincinnati, the last 2 to 3 drafts, I'll say, have done such a good job of adding players who can make an immediate impact while also future-proofing the roster. And I mean, like an example of that is they took Jordan Battle in the 3rd round. And I feel like, he could definitely be an immediate Von Bell replacement. But they also drafted Dax Hill in the 1st round last year as a contingency plan for when they lose Jesse Bates. And, we'll kind of talk about Dax Hill a little bit later on anyways, as you can see on the screen. And then they draft someone like a DJ Turner in the 2nd round this year. And it's like, I could see him start right away if he really picks it up and, hits the ground running. Or at the worst, he's a Chidobe Awuzie replacement. He could be a Mike Hilton replacement in the slot. A lot of different ways that you could go about this. And again, maybe he's a starter right now, but he's certainly a starter by year 2. And again, it's just this balance of being able to address immediate needs while also drafting the future. Another good example of that is Myles Murphy, right? Like Sam Hubbard is coming towards the end of his extension that he got a couple years ago. Trey Hendrickson playing towards the end of his 3-year deal they got or gave to him when he left New Orleans. So just adding that guy who might be good right now, might be able to contribute, but also by years 2 and 3, feels like he's going to have a pretty easy path to a starting position. So again, I just love how Cincinnati walks that line of getting contributors now, but also future-proofing the roster. So got to give him an A there. The overall offseason grade, I got to go with an A. This is where, again, maybe I should have made Baltimore an A-, because I think these two teams both had awesome off seasons. Biggest move, I'll go with Orlando Brown Jr. Because some of their draft moves are, again, future-proofing. So who made the biggest impact right away? I'll say Orlando Brown Jr. To me, he's the best offensive lineman that they've been able to put in front of Joe Burrow. So I also think they got him at a solid contract point too. So biggest question mark, this has to be safety, because in the single offseason, you lose 2 huge impact players, Jesse Bates at free safety, Von Bell at strong. I do think Dax Hill, was drafted with a thought in mind of being a Jesse Bates replacement, moving him to free safety. So I'm really excited to see his uber twitchy athleticism and great coverage skills. There were even thoughts that maybe he could end up playing some corner. I'd love to see that type of skill set over the top, and I think that could be a big player that goes a long way to softening the blow of losing someone like a Jesse Bates. And then, the other name to mention here is Jordan Battle. I almost put both these names on here, but I actually think Jordan Battle really can be that Von Bell level replacement. I'm not saying he's going to be Von Bell right away, but I think he could eventually serve and play in that same role at a similar level. Not a high-end athlete, but just does every single thing else right. Actually had a better 40 than Xavier McKinney, but that's kind of been the player I've been comping him to. Same school scouting. I know it's a little lazy, but seriously, these two players do make me think a lot of one another. And I just look at the impact McKinney's had in New York. I think Jordan Battle could do a lot of the same thing in Cincinnati while playing that Von Bell role, which has proven to be very pivotal for that Lou Anarumo defense. All right, anyways, let's move on to the Cleveland Browns now. They finished last in the division last year, which is actually a little surprising, but obviously they missed Deshaun Watson for a majority of last year. Free agency grade, I'll give it a B. They didn't do a whole lot. Ogbo Okoronkwo, Juan Thornhill. They bring back Anthony Walker Jr. A couple names we'll talk about here. I actually think Juan Thornhill is an awesome signing. They've had a bit of an issue at safety last couple of years. I remember when they signed John Johnson III, and it's like, okay, there, boom, that's the answer. And they had Grant Delpit come in as well as the player they drafted out of LSU. And I felt like they were working towards a really awesome safety room, and it just didn't really come together under Joe Woods. So the other note here is Jim Schwartz taking over as a DC. I actually think that raises the floor of this defense a lot, which that was a big reason why this team was 7-10 last year. I think about the choke job that Browns defense had against the Jets and Joe Flacco. So hopefully they get shored up and this team gets better if they do, kind of figure that out and take a step forward. But yeah, Juan Thornhill I actually think is a really underrated player, really good in coverage. Just, Kansas City has a deep rotation of safeties, and these guys aren't really playing a full, snap share compared to other guys and other starters across the league. So I think Thornhill's going to get a bigger role and become a really good player and a consistent starter for Cleveland. So I like that signing a ton. Draft grade, I'll give him a B+. They almost get a benefit because I feel like they drafted so well despite not having a first and second rounder. So maybe you dock the grade because they don't have those first and second round picks. But honestly, I think they did a great job with what they had that I'm almost more impressed by it. But I'll go Cedric Tillman for my favorite pick. To me, Donovan Peoples-Jones is kind of a one-note guy, and that one note's fine. But I'd rather see another guy that can reliably work the sideline, be a possession guy. That way you can do more things with Amari Cooper, who feels like a jack of all trades. Also, the trade for Elijah Moore was something I wanted to note here. That's kind of my honorable mention for the offseason best move, because you trade back around and get that extra wide receiver that you desperately need. And you got a guy that can be a great yak weapon, but also an abundance of speed to take the top off the defense. And that was something they were kind of missing. So now I look at that wide receiver room, and let's just say Donovan Peoples-Jones ultimately loses the job to Cedric Tillman. It's him, it's Elijah Moore, and of course it's Amari Cooper. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, that's a trio that I think Deshaun Watson can do some serious damage with. So gotta love the Cedric Tillman pick. Ethan Postage, I think, is the future starter at center. Easton Postage. That's who's going to lose the starting job to Luke Whippler, who they took in the 6th round. I think he's going to be their long-term starter post Ethan Postage era. And also Siaki Ika. I've been kind of up and down with him throughout draft cycle. Started out really high, and then his combine really kind of had me sour on him. But Cleveland was the one spot where I was like, I kind of want to see him go there and partner up with Dalvin Tomlinson. So feels like that defensive line, all in all, has taken a huge step forward, which kind of leads us into the offseason grade. I'll go B+ overall. And that Za'Darius Smith trade, to me, was fantastic. And I mean, naturally, those trades are one-sided because the team is trying to shed salary. So they'll just take whatever they can get to be able to take that contract off the books. So to get Za'Darius Smith, a guy who played really well and was arguably the best pass rusher in Minnesota last year, for the value of a mid-5th round pick, how can you not love that, right? And again, this defensive line went from Myles Garrett and who to, okay, well, now they got Myles Garrett. They signed Ogbo Okoronkwo. They got a couple of young players, Alex Wright from the 22 draft, Isaiah McGuire from this year's draft. I think the trade for Za'Darius Smith, that's easily the best defensive end they've had accompany Myles Garrett. And on the inside, they signed Dalvin Tomlinson, really good run defender who can also get you some pass rush production. Siaki Ika, massive human being with a lot of lower body strength. Hopefully he helps in that run defense side of it, but also got a little bit of a spin and finesse move. Like, he's got a little bit of a finesse pass rush profile where he's kind of an intriguing pick at 98 because he can give you a little bit of both. So again, all of a sudden that D-line went from like a glaring weakness for everyone not named Myles Garrett to a unit I look at and I'm like, whoa, the Browns are good. I think that's going to be a big reason why, because they'll have a good pass rush and they made huge strides in run defense. So I'm actually really excited to see that defensive line. And then kind of on that note, talking about run defense specifically, biggest question mark left, I'll go linebacker. I almost put who might step up for Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. He took a little bit of a step back in year 2 and he's still been battling injuries throughout his early career. But to me, I don't know if he really changes anything, even if he's healthy. Like, I don't know if he's the guy that's going to help them take another step forward in run defense, to me, that's Anthony Walker Jr., right? Like, you sign Dalvin Thompson, you draft Siaki Ika, you hope those two guys plug the middle and shore up run defense for sure. But you also need one more linebacker who can, read, react, shoot gaps, is a sure tackler. And, go back 2 years ago, Anthony Walker had a really solid year when he first got to Cleveland and then missed a lot of time last year. But I tend to be a pretty big Anthony Walker believer, so maybe this is just me liking the player a lot. But I think he could be that solid, above average, steady linebacker presence that on top of those 2D tackles you brought in, that trio ultimately is what takes this team from a bottom-end run defense squad to at least middle of pack. And then Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah could feature into that, but to me, he is much more the coverage specialist, while let's just let Anthony Walker focus on being, the run-stopping linebacker with that in his focus. So, all in all, really good offseason for the Cleveland Browns. And the same can be said about the Pittsburgh Steelers. Honestly, the AFC North kind of crushed it this offseason. So, yeah, I mean, it's an exciting time if you're one of these fan of one of these four teams. And for whatever reason, they wouldn't let me put the underline of that U. So apologies. I know that's an eyesore. It's killing me right now. But Pittsburgh comes in third place in the AFC North last year. Actually finished with a winning record, which was surprising to me and probably other Steelers fans as well. Mike Tomlin, the man, just does nothing but produce 500 or better seasons. Free agency, I'll go B. It was kind of another modest offseason. Pittsburgh is not known for being a team that's going to go out there and make flashy moves or anything. Pat Peterson's signing is fine enough. That plus, we'll come back to corner actually a little bit later on. But Isaac Seumalo, to me, hands down, the best signing. And now it's back-to-back off seasons where they added this really solid interior offensive lineman for exactly 3 years, $24 million. In the 2022 offseason, it was James Daniels. This past offseason in free agency, it was Isaac Seumalo. And Daniels comes with guard center flexibility. Seumalo played right guard. I think he's slotted in to be the left guard starter for Pittsburgh, but you have some flexibility about where these guys line up. And all of a sudden, that interior offensive line group goes from a huge weakness 2 years ago, 3 years ago when they drafted Najee Harris, to now it's like, okay, well, you got Daniels, you got Seumalo, you could start Dotson, you could start Green, or you got Mason Cole, who was solid enough last year at center. So you got some options, you got some depth as well, which goes a long way. And who knows, they may end up trading Kendrick Green or Kevin Dotson or something like that and try to get a 2024 draft pick in exchange. And then, kind of talking offensive line, that leads us to the NFL draft. I thought it was an A+. Actually, my least favorite pick of the first four selections Pittsburgh made is probably Broderick Jones. And it's nothing against the player. I was just lower on him than most. But that being said, he was OT4. I had Anton Harrison at OT3. To me, there was a 0% chance that the Steelers took Anton Harrison unless he fell to them like midway through the second round. Like if he was there at 49, maybe they think about it just because the value is that good. He's just not the type and the people mover, the mauler. I just don't think he's the fit they were looking for. To me, he's a better pass protector, and that's why I would covet him. I don't think he was the type that the Pittsburgh Steelers were looking for. Instead, Broderick Jones was 100% what they wanted because high-end athlete, one-year starter, only going to get better in pass protection. But this dude will throw you in the dirt and laugh at you while he puts you in, while he embarrasses you. So I definitely think he's more of that mauler. Think about an offensive line that would block for Najee Harris. Broderick Jones much more fits that image than an Anton Harrison. So that's probably the pick I disliked the most. But again, it felt very Steelers of them. But then thereafter, Joey Porter Jr., first pick of the second round. That's a dream come true for Steelers fans. We would have been happy with him at 14 after the trade up, or 17 if we just stick and picked. And then Keanu Benton at 49. Ultimately, I think that is my favorite pick, that or Joey Porter Jr. I mean, it's really hard to tell. And honestly, I'm not mad with either answer. We'll come back to Porter Jr. in a little bit. But Keanu Benton, it was just that nose tackle they had been looking for. And they kind of initially had when Tyson Alualu first got to Pittsburgh. But, after those first 2 years of Alualu in Pittsburgh, he's taken a step back. Montravius Adams hasn't really been anything special. I think Keanu Benton is a already really high-level run defender, while a lot of people want Mozzie Smith to be this plus-level pass rusher. I think Keanu Benton's already kind of that. He is much quicker than you think out of the line of scrimmage. He has a developed moveset, has good hands, can fight at the line of scrimmage. I mean, there's not much in Keanu Benton's game that I don't like, other than the fact that he's not as twitchy an athlete maybe as Mozzie Smith, and he's not like the youngest of prospects maybe, but at that point, we're nitpicking, right? And to get him in the middle of the second round, perfect fit, extremely good value in my eyes, especially after Mozzie Smith went in the first round. Felt like it was Keanu Benton waiting for a while there, and ultimately he lasts on the board long enough for Pittsburgh to make him, the selection. Because I kind of thought Mozzie goes the first round, New Orleans might take Keanu Benton, maybe a Seattle takes them. There's a couple teams that might be interested in tapping into the IDL market. So I'm glad that Benton made it all the way to 49. And then also Darnell Washington. I mean, an absolute steal. He's going to be tight end 2 in Pittsburgh, and Freiermuth's going to get the receiving work, but Darnell Washington for an offensive line that its weakest points are still the tackles, Broderick Jones and whoever wins that right tackle spot, Dan Moore or Chukwuma Okorafor. Let's just assume it's Okorafor. Darnell Washington is going to go a long way to adding some insurance and some extra protection for either of those two guys. Well, also, again, think about the offensive line and the image that, or the tone and the attitude that Pittsburgh wants to have, paving the way for Najee Harris. Darnell Washington fits that, and it's just basically a sixth offensive lineman for a team that wants to run the ball a lot. So he's a great scheme fit, great culture fit as well. And even Nate Herbig, they already signed Nick Herbig in the offseason, but Pittsburgh and their fascination of having brothers on the team continues. I'm not a huge Nate Herbig guy, but I was actually intrigued by him falling to the fourth round, and he felt very much like a Steelers fit because he could play a little bit of off-ball linebacker where they needed help. He could be that third pass rusher where they were looking for some depth, so I actually don't mind the Herbig pick whatsoever. Biggest question mark, it's got to be corner. You signed Pat Pete, but he is a zone specialist at this point. And not that Joey Porter Jr. can play zone. I don't think he'd be left out to dry by any stretch of the imagination. But you think of Joey Porter Jr., thinking man press and then cover 2-4-6 off of it. So I'm really intrigued to see where Pittsburgh might pivot. The league as a whole is going much more quarters heavy and more zone heavy. In general, it's 2-to-1 zone to man ratio across the entire league. So, maybe they're thinking, hey, Joey Porter Jr. and Pat Pete, we're going to run some cover 6. Pat Pete will have the zone side, and Porter Jr. is going to have maybe a little bit more man responsibilities. Or we'll play, cover 3 match. That way we get a little bit of Porter Jr. and man, and Pat Pete too, but it's kind of just him playing an alleyway. Maybe it's strictly quarters, maybe it's strictly cover 3. I don't know, but that is one of the big things I'm looking for out of Pittsburgh's, offseason training camp, rookie OT, all that sort of stuff. What is that defensive philosophy, and what are we asking our secondary to do this upcoming year? So I'm really excited to see Terrell Austin basically take the podium. Mike Tomlin too, former DB's coach, defensive-minded head coach. So I'm excited to see what they have to say about what they're doing on the coverage side of it, because Porter Jr. plus Pat Pete at this point in his career, not necessarily the most seamless one-to-one match there. But anyways, that's going to do it for my offseason grades for the AFC North. Tell me what you think about these 4 teams and their offseason. Who had the best free agency period? Who had the best draft? And who overall out of these 4 teams do you think had the best offseason? And what would you give them for their grades? Let me hear your thoughts down below in the comment section. Tell me where I was right. Tell me where I was wrong. Love to have the conversation, talking ball with you down below. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Hit that like button if you did. Subscribe if you're new to the channel and want to see more football content like this. But until next time, my name is Teach, and I am signing off.